Now, in the meantime, let's turn our attention to the state of Kentucky, where testimony in the fled the scene murder case is set to resume at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Defendant Bradley Caraway is accused of murder after allegedly driving drunk and causing his car to veer off the road, overturning and landing near an off-ramp. His passenger, 25-year-old Shanae Moorman, was ejected and ended up trapped underneath his car, where she later died. But the big question for the jury is, who was really behind the wheel that night? For more on the background of this case, here's Court TV crime and justice correspondent Matt Johnson.
Caraway crashed on the ramp off Interstate 64 in Louisville, Kentucky in the early morning hours of August 6, 2016. His car overturned, ejecting Shanae Moorman and trapping her under the vehicle. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Caraway was not in the car when police arrived. He was arrested several hours later, walking along the ramp to Taylorsville Road. According to the incident report, officers at the scene observed Bradley Caraway was wearing no shirt or shoes and had injuries that were consistent with being in a motor vehicle collision. The officers also noted that Caraway smelled strongly of alcohol and appeared intoxicated.
Shanae was ejected from the Honda. We have Bradley Caraway unscathed. We have Bradley Caraway leaving Shanae trapped under his car. Not a call for help, nothing, just left her there to die. The driver of the car is Bradley Caraway, the drunk driver that took Shanae's life.
And the truth is, Bradley Caraway was not driving the vehicle when it crashed.
The defense points to this video as evidence that suggests Moorman was driving.
But you'll see how they lead and who seems to be in charge and who's leading who out of the bar. But she takes him by the hand and she is leading him out of that bar. And she's going out first. He is following.
The defense also claims that Caraway's blood found in the passenger side of the car is further evidence that he was not the driver that night, but prosecutors disagree.
It will be clear to you that the defendant, Bradley Caraway, was driving his Honda Accord, that he left Shanae, and that he is guilty of murder. And we will ask you, on behalf of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, to find him guilty of murder based on the evidence presented to you.
What do you think so far of this case, friends? Tweet us. Let us know right now. I'm going to bring in my guests, see what they think. Still with me in Washington, D.C., law enforcement expert Sonny Slaughter is on the program. And joining us this morning from Atlanta, Georgia, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, and entertainment lawyer, Daryl Cohen is joining us as well. Daryl, good morning. Nice to see you as well. Goodness gracious, where do we begin with this case? This is so awful. Oh my gosh. So you have this gorgeous young woman with her whole life ahead of her. She meets Bradley Caraway at a bar. The two have some drinks together, presumably leave together, and we really don't know what happens after that. We know his car is wrecked. He's walking along the road all disheveled. His defense team saying wasn't behind the wheel, but of course, any defense team's going to say that, right? You know, prosecutors say, oh, yes, he was the one responsible for crashing the car. What are you two, I'm curious, looking at, you know, Sonny and Daryl, when you're looking at this case to really be the telling facts as to who was driving? Because I got to tell you, that defense attorney's opening statement was quite convincing. He was giving me some doubt as I was listening to him. Sonny, let me begin with you. Tell me what you're watching for in terms of the evidence, please.
Okay, so what I'm going to be looking for is where was the seat positioned in the car for the crash? The crime scene reconstruction of the crash, the position of the seat, because there was a height differential between the victim and the alleged driver, Caraway. Also, was the mirrors on the car, depending on the crash. The, what am I talking about? the mirror at the top, the mirrors on the side, kind of what did that look like? And you can see that the car is damaged and it's flipped over, but they should be able to look at that in the car as well. And the blood could be, is the blood spatter, or is the blood, his blood, is it in a particular spot, or is it splatter? Where was that in relation to the cuts and bruises that he might have on his body?
Appreciate it, Sonny. We know this guy also has a prior DUI, but doesn't necessarily mean he did this one, or maybe it means it's more likely that he did. I don't know. Daryl Cohen, weigh in for us, please. What are you looking for, my friend?
Julie, I'm looking for someone or some cameras that may have seen them walk out of the bar, that may have seen them enter the automobile. Logic says they've just met. Logic says it's his car, he's driving. But what happens if he says to her, hey, I'm wasted, I'm inebriated, you drive? So I'm looking to see why there was his blood in the passenger side. I'm looking to see whether or not she was also intoxicated. I'm sure they did that on an autopsy. And I agree with Sonny. We're looking at the mirrors. We're looking, is there any impact video? Is there any DNA where the car impacted after it turned over? Those are things that I'm concerned about.
Right. And I'm looking at some of our research we did here at Court TV. That's all good stuff, Daryl. You know, some of this will not, probably much of this won't come before the jury, and I'm not sure what's been argued in motions in limine, but you both know, Sonny and Daryl, you know, as prosecutors on a DUI case, sometimes you can get in evidence about a prior depending on the statute, the window. I know in Pennsylvania, for instance, where I practiced, we were looking at a 10-year window. So if somebody did something within 10, you know, okay, it's going to increase the severity of the penalty, all that. If it's beyond 10, not going to affect things. So some of our research show in 2007, apparently the DUI and infractions begin. He was first charged in April of 2007 when he was on bond with that case pending. He was arrested again for DUI in December of 2013, arrested a third time for DUI in October of 2014, pleaded in 2007 and in 2013. Never served any jail time, though, just did some fines and probation, apparently. Okay, now one thing I used to say, I did a lot of DUI cases when I was a prosecutor, a lot of them. And usually what I would say to myself when I would see multiple arrests or multiple convictions, they've been drinking and driving a whole lot more than what I can see on the rap sheet. This is just when they're caught, right? Daryl, Sonny, you're both nodding. I know. Here's what I'm being told. Yeah, we're going to go into court pretty soon. The judge is going to be taking the bench soon. We're getting word. Stand by for me, please, my friends. We're going to hit a break right now. When we return, we've got some testimony from the state's first witness. Look at her. This beautiful woman is Shanae Moorman's mother. You can tell, right? She looks just like her. She is the first one to take the stand to testify in the case that is all about justice for her daughter, who was left trapped underneath that car. We'll be right back.
Bradley Caraway,
charged with murder and leaving the scene of an accident.
Trapped underneath 3,000 pounds of mangled Honda.
The Fled the Scene murder trial. Live coverage today on Court TV.
These are the cases that captivated the world.
Couldn't keep my life straight.
They were killed by their own children. Court TV Legendary Trials. Go to courttv.com/legendary trials to find out how to watch.
Thanks for staying with us here on Court TV Live. I'm Julie Grant. We're talking about the Fled the Scene murder case happening in Kentucky. Court's going to pick up any minute, so we're going to go there live as soon as the judge gets on the bench. But first, let's get you caught up on what happened last week that you may not have seen. The state's first witness was called. Shanae Moorman's mother. Shanae Moorman. The victim's name is Shanae Moorman. Her mother is Shanae, so just a difference in one letter. So excuse me for being inarticulate just now. But she was called to the witness stand to talk about the day that she learned that her little girl was gone. Take a look.
Good morning, ma'am. Would you tell your name to the jury, please?
Shanae Moorman.
And are you related to Shanae?
I'm her mother.
And I want to take you back to the early morning of August the 6th of 2016. Did police come to your door that morning?
Yes, they did.
And how many police officers?
There were two. Two at first, and then one of them might have been a coroner.
And why were they coming to your door?
To let me know that Shanae was in a car accident and didn't make it.
What went through your mind when you heard that?
Where was she? Where had she been? I knew the night before she left to go to a concert, but I had no idea what happened.
Did they tell you where the accident occurred?
I can't recall. I knew later that it was off of the Gene Snyder.
Did you think there was anything odd about that location?
Yes, because it was past our house if she was coming home. Why was she?
Was that an area she would have been in often?
No.
Tell us a little about Shanae. Where did she grow up?
Shanae was born in Louisville and went to Great House. Then she went to Barrett, and then to Male. She was very lovable, very outgoing. Shanae never met a stranger. She, after she graduated from high school, she went to the University of Louisville, where she was a cheerleader. As a cheerleader, she never met a stranger. Whenever someone came in new to the squad, Shanae was the first to welcome them to the squad, always very welcoming.
And Shanae, as a cheerleader, what was her role at cheering?
She was a flyer, if you know what that term means. She was always on the top.
Go up in the air. So she was a small person.
She was.
What was she doing for work in August of 2016?
She was an esthetician at Z Salon.
And do you have to go to school for that?
Yes, you do.
And had she recently graduated from the program?
Yes, she did.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
I'm going to hand you a photograph here. Do you recognize that?
That's Shanae.
When was that taken?
It was taken in either 2015 or 2016, probably 15.
Was that taken at her graduation from esthetician school?
It was.
And the Commonwealth would move to admit that as Commonwealth 1, Your Honor.
Judge, we don't object.
All right, it will be so admitted.
Did she have any plans for the future?
She really liked her field and had planned to pursue that more. She also was going to try to become an influencer because she really liked what she did and had a lot of people that followed her just on social media.
And she had cystic fibrosis, is that right?
That's correct.
And what is that?
Cystic fibrosis attacks your lungs mainly and your digestive system. Hers was mostly in her digestive system, where she has mucus had mucus in her system, and it clogged her pores. She had to take medicine. She had to do treatments for that.
Did she use her social media following to raise awareness for cystic fibrosis?
She did.
And also helped. She was a U of L cheerleader?
Yes.
In August of 2016, where was she living?
She was living at home.
And where is home?
In the Plainview area.
That's near J-Town, is that right?
Yes.
Before she left on the night of August 5th, 2016, did you speak with her?
I did.
And what were her plans?
She was going with friends. She was going to meet friends, and they were going to 4th Street Live to a concert.
And what was the last thing she said to you?
I told her she looked nice, and she told me she loved me and that she'd see me in the morning.
And Judge Commonwealth would ask for permission to publish Commonwealth's warrant.
That's fine.
We're having technical difficulties, Judge. I'm just going to hand the picture to the jury briefly. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Initially, ma'am, may I ask you, is it Mrs. or Miss Moorman?
Mrs.
Mrs. Moorman. My name is Ramon McGee. I'm co-counsel along with Mr. Eggert on behalf of Mr. Caraway. Initially, ma'am, I want you to understand that everyone here sympathizes with the pain you're going through. So I want you to know we understand how serious this situation is, and I do apologize for the circumstances that bring you here. I wanted to ask you a few questions about your daughter. Now, you'd indicated that back in August of 2016, she was living near the J-Town area?
Yes, she was.
And ma'am, about how far, to your knowledge, was that from the area where the traffic accident occurred?
Well, it's past where we live. She would have taken the exit before if she was on 64.
Right. Is it 5 minutes past, 10 minutes past that area, about distance-wise? What'd you say?
5 minutes.
So just 5 minutes away from the area where she lived at the time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. You indicated that you had the opportunity to speak to Shanae before the events that led us here, before her death. That was the evening of August the 5th, ma'am?
That's correct.
Okay. And she told you of her plans to go out with friends, correct?
That's correct.
Which friends was she going out with that night?
I'm not exactly sure. I know Ronald Ford was one of her friends. Callie Masters was another one of her friends that she was going to meet. Kim DeBar.
Okay. And who were they going to meet at 4th Street?
I'm not sure who they were meeting. They were going to a concert.
Yes, ma'am. And the concert was on 4th Street, is that correct?
That's correct.
Did she contact you when she arrived at 4th Street?
No, she didn't.
Okay. You've become aware since August of 2016 that your daughter left 4th Street and at some point went to the St. Matthews area. Is that correct, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay. And are you familiar with a bar in that location called the Tin Roof?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And do you know what decision led them to go there that night?
No, I don't.
Okay. So there was some kind of conversation or events that you're not aware of that led your daughter to go from downtown to St. Matthews. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. And then you've learned that there's a second location that's important to this case. It's a club called Gerstl's. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And ma'am, do you know anything about what led your daughter to leave the group and go to Gerstl's that morning? So, ma'am, you'd agree that there were some things that your daughter's activities included, her social activities that you weren't aware of that night or that morning. Is that correct?
Yes, I will.
All right. You described her as a very social and outgoing person. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't unusual for her to meet people and to socialize and to have fun. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you'd agree that both Gerstl's and Tin Roof, as well as 4th Street Live, the whole point is for adults to get out and have fun, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And your daughter was certainly a sociable person based on your description. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Ma'am, do you have any idea how she met Mr. Caraway?
No, I do not.
Okay. So you'd agree that there were things that happened in Gerstl's of which you were unaware?
Of course, I wasn't there.
And that's entirely the point. Your daughter was 25 at the time of her death, is that correct?
That's correct.
So she was an adult with adult activities?
Yes.
Did that include drinking?
Yes.
Okay. And you were aware at the time that she was a social drinker, is that correct?
Yes, I was.
All right. And ma'am, I do apologize for the question, but it's important. Did you find out after your daughter passed away whether or not she had been drinking that morning?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And what did you find out?
That she had been drinking.
Okay. And did that surprise you based on what you knew about her social life?
No, and she always, when she knew she was going to be drinking, she used Uber to get around.
Yes, ma'am. Were there ever times that your daughter got behind the wheel after she'd been drinking and didn't use an Uber?
No.
Okay. Now, ma'am, you just testified that there are things about your daughter's social life that you're unaware of, correct?
That's correct.
So it's possible that she decided to drive after having some drinks without you being aware of it? Is it possible?
It's possible.
Okay. Ma'am, I don't have any additional questions. Thank you.
Anything on redirect?
You said that if she knew she'd be drinking, she would use an Uber.
That's correct.
You know of no instances where she didn't use an Uber and had been drinking?
I'm sorry.
You don't know of any instances where she drove after drinking?
That's correct.
Nothing further, Judge.
Not sure why the defense attorney felt the need to cross-examine Mom there. If it were me, I would have apologized to her for her loss and just sat down. Mom was not an eyewitness to this. Leave her alone. She suffered an unimaginable loss already. Guess what, my friends? We're getting word the testimony is going to be starting up any moment, and we're going to hear from some eyewitnesses to the tragic crash leading up to the live court day here on Court TV. Look at this. Imagine the Shanae Moorman trapped underneath that car. The question remains, who was driving? Stay with us. This is Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
A tragedy in the Hollywood Hills. Prominent therapist Dr. Amy Hardwick found fatally injured under her balcony.
Her ex-boyfriend on trial for her murder.
She had a restraining order against him.
He strangled her, lifted her up over the balcony, and dropped her. He never intended on killing her.
Is this a case of a jilted lover turned obsessive stalker?
The Hollywood Obsession Murder Trial. Trial coverage today on Court TV.
Man, can you hear me? It's across Ramp 64 east to 265 south. Did anybody see the wreck happen? No. I came. He was already here, and I came upon it, and I stopped. And it's on top of her. It's
Thanks for being with us here on Court TV Live. I'm Julie Grant. Police were called to the scene of an accident where they found 25-year-old Shanae Moorman trapped underneath the car and unresponsive. Sadly, she died right there at the scene. And prosecutors believe defendant Bradley Caraway is the person who was driving the crashed car that night. Prosecutors believe he's responsible for Shanae Moorman's death. And while it may have only been the two of them in the car that night, there was another eyewitness to the crash, another driver. His name is James Smalley. He was on the road that night and witnessed the reckless driving that led to this tragedy.
As I approached the exit to Taylorsville Road, in fact, I was already at where the ramp started, where you could hit the exit. A car came up on me, traveling at a very high rate of speed, and it did make that exit. It made a right turn in front of me, it was actually frightening to me because of the proximity of that car to my car, and the speed, that combination. It actually scared me. It was a smaller car than mine. I was driving a big Lincoln, and that small little car shook my car like a big truck does sometimes when they pass you. The car, I looked down at that point to see how fast I was going. I was going 70 miles an hour. That car was going much faster than I was going, much faster. That car continued on the ramp, and then I noticed it put its brake on. It looked like it left the road, leaving the ramp, and it may have turned. By that point, I was traveling 70 miles an hour. I was past that point. I continued on to my exit, which was the next exit, to turn on to go to Middletown, which is where I live, just off Shelbyville Road.
Mr. Smalley, what were the weather conditions like that night?
It was clear. It was a really nice night.
Okay. Were there any other cars involved with the car that cut in front of you?
No, I didn't see any other cars with them. After I passed that intersection, there was another car. I saw another car, so that's the only.
Let's talk about that other car just for a second.
Okay.
Where did you see that car, and what was the car doing?
I must have saw that car about here or so. The car was also in the center lane. It was traveling at a high rate of speed. It passed me and made what I would consider a normal kind of passing motion to cut in front of me, and then it braked hard and made this loop.
Okay.
So, and I followed it off.
So the second car was traveling the same direction that you were?
Yes.
And the first car took this exit ramp toward the Gene Snyder in the opposite direction that you
Yes.
were?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I went in an opposite direction from that car.
Now, you told us that you were driving a big Lincoln, right? The car that you saw on this ramp, you said it was smaller than yours?
Yes.
Was it dark in color, light in color?
I believe it was dark.
A dark. So a sedan, not an SUV?
Oh, not an SUV. No.
Okay.
It's a much smaller car than mine.
So a smaller, dark sedan?
Yes. Well, I don't know if it's a sedan or a two.
Or a two-door?
Yeah,
Sure.
I don't know.
Sure. Did you call the police? And you can take a seat. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Can I keep this one? That night, no. I saw a car go off the road, but I didn't know what happened to it. I was preoccupied with keeping my eye on the road, and there was another car, and I made the loop and went home, let my dogs out, and went to bed. Next morning.
Police?
What's that?
Did you talk to the police at some point?
Yes. The next morning, I noticed that there was an accident, and about that time, and I assumed that was probably the car I saw, and I called the police to see if there was if I could be helpful in any way to tell them what I saw. So I called the police, and the next morning, immediately, and the officer came out, and I gave him a statement.
Okay. And you told us that you left Caesars at about 2 a.m. It takes 45 minutes to get to your house.
Yeah.
How far is your house from this exit ramp that the car lost control at?
That's 2 miles.
About 2 miles. How long would you think it would take you from there to get to your house?
Oh, less than 5 minutes.
Less than 5 minutes. Okay. All right, Mr. Smalley, those are all the questions that I have for you at this time. Thank you.
All right, what do we think so far? Let me bring back in my guests, Sunny Slaughter and Daryl Cohen on the program watching along with us. Okay, what do we think of this witness's testimony, the eyewitness on the roadway that night? Daryl, let me start with you, please.
I love it. He's terrific. He is articulate. He's honest, but he's not telling us what we need to know because he didn't know what we needed to know. Who was driving the car? We know that the person driving it was driving it in a reckless manner based upon his testimony, the way they passed him, etc. But unfortunately, he doesn't seem to know whether it was a male or a female driving, and that's what we need to find out.
Yeah, you're right, Daryl. That is the problem. Sunny Slaughter, your thoughts? Do you think the prosecution is going to be able to get there and get witnesses who can put him in the car?
I would hope that, as my co-guest stated earlier, they would be looking at any video footage from when they were at the bar or any stores and surrounding areas to determine who was got into the driver's seat and the passenger seat, and if there were along the way any cameras that potentially caught them to determine. But I think this is really good eyewitness testimony about the rate of speed and everything that was going on. And it's also unlikely that someone that you just met would take your vehicle and drive it at such a high rate of speed for some unknown reason. I mean, it's not impossible, but it just seems a little unlikely that she would engage in that type of activity.
Mm-hmm. And here's another thing, too, with this guy. And defense counsel really framed him to be clean hands in all this, so to speak. Not driving, not behind the wheel, didn't crash it. Yeah, but they conceded he was in the car. So his defense team saying he was in the car. What about calling for help? He could still move his hands. He had full function of his body. To me, there's a problem with that. And I think to try to just kind of gloss over that, I don't think is going to bode well for this jury, because if he was in that car and the worst thing he did was not calling for help, then they need to concede that. They really do. They need to concede that, own it, because it just looks bad. But here it seems like counsel's more concerned about just the liability for the driving, probably because he's got so many prior DUIs and guaranteed a prison sentence if he's found guilty.